Hey YouTube, what's up? Thanks for tuning in. Second video about the Atlas 6x6, this awesome tiny 1 to 18th scroller. In this video I will take it apart and take a look inside. First I'll have to remove those nice hinged body. There are magnets inside. No, but first let's remove the battery. Two O-rings. That's not very easy to get those batteries, to get this battery outside. A 600 milliamp hour 7.4 volt 2S LiPo, and now I will take the body off. So only two small screws mount the hinge. The hinge is, or those hinge brackets are also mounted by two screws each to the plastic front grille. This was an easy job, but removing the wires for the lights needs cutting of those zip ties. So a little bit more effort, let's do this. So unfortunately, front and rear lights or LEDs are plugged to the receiver by only one connector, a 1.25 millimeter JST connector, and so it's not that easy to remove the body and I don't want to cut those wires now. There seem to be resistors under this shrink tube, so that's a bit of a pain. I don't want to remove the rear lights now. Let's see if it works that way. Closer look to the body. Plastic front grille, nice hard plastic. Lights, hard plastic. Screwed to the Lexan body, and the LEDs are simply plugged into the lights here, but maybe it's possible even to get them out easily. Okay, now I could take off the body. Therefore you only have to remove the LEDs from the lamps, but that's not that easy. I had to unscrew the light buckets because the LEDs are clipped into the light bucket and this plastic is not very flexible. Same, removing the front lens is not that easy. However, I managed to do it. And if you have managed to clip off the LEDs from the light bucket, you can simply get them through those openings here. So, body off. And here you can see the magnet. and here the counterpart. Quite strong magnets. The body sits really well secured. And here's the 2-in-1 unit that also powers the lights. And what you can see here is this. First I remove the plug of the servo, a normal 3-wire servo plug. Nice. And what you can see here, this unit does have a LiPo mode and a nickel metal hydride mode. So with one of those plugs as used from larger ESCs, you can change. And here is a bind plug. And this is probably a plug for an FPV camera or something like this. Okay, double-sided tape. This unit looks interesting. To take out the receiver ESC unit, I had to clip off one more cable tie. And you can see here 20 amp ESC. The unit is called RX46 FMS. A bind plug, nickel metal hydride LiPo. The 2mm JST-PH plug is for the motor. This Tamiya style 2mm plug for the battery. And then there are two outs. Here's the on-off switch. Can be mounted that way as we are used from in a lot of larger ESCs. So I will test it later and check what voltage comes out of those two 1.25mm JST. So I will test those plugs later and see what comes out, what power, what voltage comes out of those. Those are 1.25 JST-GH plugs. Interesting little unit. And since the radio does have a channel 3, maybe you can switch on off lights. I will test it later. No, let's test it now. Maybe I overlooked something and it's possible to switch on off lights with the channel 3. Come on. So which one was the one for? And they are the same for the LEDs. Come on. And switch it on. Okay, and channel 3. No. Unfortunately not. So I wonder if this receiver does have a channel 3. Does not look as if it had. The radio does, the receiver not. So simply mounted by 2 screws. Looks quite nice too, because it's labeled waterproof. 1 kilogram servo, metal ball joints, and most important, no 5-wire servos, so if necessary it would be quite easy to use an upgrade servo, but so far I don't have any complaints, and if it's waterproof, that's really nice. Remove the first tire and you see the hex. No, they are plastic. I thought they looked like metal. Tires mounted with a nut screw, and they are real beadlock tires. So it will be quite easy, and contrary to the Mini C, to put foams inside and maybe weights, or only to the front. 5 screws. Looks quite nice. Hex diameter is 7 millimeter. Boing. So quite nice tires. They are not super sticky, as you've seen in the drive tests in my first video. They are sticky, and they look quite scale with some labelings. Looking good, and they seem to be directional. Okay, let's see. Terra set 19.1 by 13.5 by 56. Can someone read it on camera? And to check the axles, I guess I will start with one of the rear axles. That's easier. Driveshafts, of course plastic, but joints are metal and they are mounted by screws here. So looks quite okay for me. Shocks, okay. I will remove the rear shocks and the rear axle, and then let's see. Okay, and now I really failed to remove the shocks here. Those are Phillips head or P-set screws, I don't know. And I was unable to remove those screws on both sides. I tried even P-set, not only PH, screwdrivers, 0, 1, 00, no chance on both sides. And if you take a look inside here, you see the frame is metal and those seem to be glued. Inside. So not only thread lock, they seem really to be glued. Not an easy job. Also removing the links was not that easy. Some kind of ball link pliers coming quite handy here. Everything really sturdy. So that's the third axle. The drive shaft joints are metal. There seems also to be a metal pin in, which can give a problem. I do already see it. Which tries to come out on one side. So better try to, maybe you can see this pin does not stick out on that side. I will have to repair this. Shafts are mounted to the output by tiny Phillips head screws. Those are not a problem to remove. Is it 00 or 30? Phillips head screwdriver. Metal joints looks nice. This pin does not look nice. Links are plastic, of course, but quite sturdy, not flexible. And those joints, they look sturdy too. How do we get those out? Okay. Tiny metal pin. And those axles look like the 124th axles of the Euro AV Mavic crawler. The gears look the same, but the axles are wider. Yes, they are. But the center, the diff and diff cover seem to be exactly the same as in the 1/24 longer. Those screws sit firmly, really. And plastic gears. No lubrication at all, but ball bearings. And those, oh man, no, those are no ball bearings. Now I'm a little bit disappointed. Check this out. Bushings. They look okay quality wise, but for this price, honestly, I would have expected ball bearings. And here we do have come on, get out. That's a bushing too. So that's quite a bummer for me now, because, well, this truck is far more than 100 euros and dollars, and I guess one could expect ball bearings for this price. Outside, bushings too. Bushings, plastic gears, first disappointment with the FMS Atlas 6x6. Since gears are not lubricated anyway, and I want to lubricate them, I will disassemble all 3 axles and take out the other 2 axles now. Center axle, not lubricated. Bushings, but those bushings, I will compare them to the bushing of the bushings of the 1224th T90 I have. They look kind of polished, so they look better quality than many others do. And finally the front axle. 3 links only because it has a panhard bar. Here you can see the panhard bar now. Quite nice in such a small truck. Should avoid bump steering. And here we do have the front axle. Runs rather smooth, but could run smoother. Steering rod, plastic. So here we have the steering knuckles. Those are made out of metal. Pushing inside here, pushing outside here. And here the front axles. Center. C-hubs, plastic of course. And now the front axle housing should come apart. Looks exactly the same, of course, as the other axles do. Runs smoothly, plastic. And now let's check if the front and center shocks are as hard to get off as the rear shocks. In the rear shocks I did already damage the Phillips head screws because it's impossible to get them out. And same stuff here. That's a pH0, no chance. And that's a pH1. Okay. This front shock screw comes out. They used Loctite, what's nice normally I would say, but they seem to have used a lot of Loctite. And you see in the frame you can mount the shocks on different positions. What's nice. Let's put the screw inside again and take this shock off. Soft springs, plastic. You get harder springs with the Atlas, but I do not feel the springs are too soft. Let's take one of those harder springs out. Those are harder. I will take another shock off and make a comparison. Let's hope this shock will come off as easy as the other front shock came off. Let's take it. You can get off Loctite with heat, of course, but if you heat up the screws, probably no chance. The plastic will melt. Let's try with my fantastic engineers screw remove pliers. Yes. Wow. Wow, no. Check this out, guys. What a P in the A. I broke the screw now. Now I have to drill out this screw or take another hole for a spare screw. Oh man, not good. However, highly can recommend this Engineer PZ 57. It has helped me a lot already. It's not expensive and you can get it on Amazon. Stock springs. This part and put the harder spring on. And check the difference. Quite a lot of difference. Those springs are much harder. But I liked the soft springs in my test drives. And will use those still. Do not see any need for using the harder springs. But there's a big difference, and maybe if you put FPV gear or whatever inside of the Atlas, the harder springs will come very handy. I will let it stock now, but I will put some grease inside, but I don't think an oil film would, as I did it in my Mini C, will make a lot of sense in those tiny shocks. Where's the Mini C? Still here. The shocks of the Mini C are they are a little bit wider and larger, so those are very tiny cylinders. Again, does not come off, and even if I want to put some oil, not oil, grease inside the shocks, it's not absolutely necessary to take the shock off. But same problem again. Did get out a little bit, but not much. And my engineer plier will get it out, but maybe I will break the next screw. No. This screw comes out now. Not that much, but still a lot of Loctite. Still 3 shocks are missing. Super thin head, and there's not a lot for the screwdriver to grip on. Ton of Loctite again, but frame without shocks. Of course we want to take a look into the central transmission and all this stuff, so let's continue. And now we have the problem again with the cable ties. Stuff the last, I guess. So that's no. The screws. The rear lights are mounted by screws. That's nice. Quite nice as the front lights are. That's the same type of screw, Phillips head, that in a little bit longer version mounts the shocks, and the cap or the head of this screw is really weak. However, LEDs can also blind those with E7000. And here's the, how would you call this, rear roll cage and rear transport, whatever. Check this out. That's also, the cage is easier to get off. It's mounted by 2 screws here to this bracket which comes into the frame. So it's easier to, and again here 2 screws. So it's easier to get this off as it seemed to me. And that's mounted. Okay. There are two screws which mount these chrome parts, short screws. And now I can take off and we get to the frame. This is made out of metal, everything else is made out of plastic. Maybe my fantastic engineer player can take it out from the other side. We will see. There's a little bit of... it's not enough. Let's heat it up. And not melt any plastic. Took the chassis rail off now and try to get out this broken screw, and here you can see how much Loctite they used. Everything's totally full and sticky. I will clean this before I reassemble the car, and now I try to drill out this screw. Try to manage it with a 1mm drill. What a pain. I'm drilling new holes into the frame and not drilling the steel screw. Okay, no chance. Let's try with a large drill. And if this does not work, I will have to use some different mounting holes. What a pain. What a pain. There seems to be no chance to get this steel screw out of this aluminium or whatever metal soft frame. This is a pain. Now I made a slit to get it out with a screwdriver. But there's not enough meat. No, it's already broken again. What a pain is this? Let's make it flat at least. Okay, bad luck. Don't get out this broken screw, so simply we'll have to use one of the other holes for the shock here. And here you can see the motor. So this seems to be a 180 motor, in my opinion. And the transmission, the motor is really strong. I will have to compare it to the 1/24 Euro EV later. So let's take apart the transmission. And here I can feel why it does have such a good drag brake. And this transmission seems to be the same, exactly the same transmission as in this 1/24 Defender. I will still have to make a review video for this. Also the shocks seem to be the same with different springs. So those super expensive upgrade shocks that are available for this should fit to the Atlas 2. So exactly the same, even the quality checked sticker seems to be the same, but this is not a Euro AV, this is a AMEVI, it's everything's the same, Hobby Plus and whatever, but here you can see probably the same fabric it comes out of. That's German AMEVI company, but I also have a Euro AV one, exactly the same, and that's FMS models. Same stuff, same screws. However, let's take a look inside. Let it come off. And check this out. Pinion spur. No lubrication. So that's the base plate and that's the transmission. I will have to take off the drive shaft. When reassembling it, it already see bushings inside here. And in the central transmission, I guess bearing upgrade would be nice. I'm not sure. Here is one more mounting screw. If it's necessary in the axles, because the Atlas is told to be waterproof and can run in water, and so ball bearings, cheap ball bearings, would probably rust easily if you use it a lot in water. Boing. But inside the transmission, ball bearings could be worthwhile. Ball bearings could be worth an upgrade. Where did this come from? Probably from here. I don't know. So here you can see the center gears, plastic bushings. And the motor can be taken off, of course. And this seems to be new compared to my Euro AV plate. This, now we'll have to take it off. Motor and 2 screw holes for mounting the motor, but there are holes on the opposite side too. And that's not the fact in the Euro AV transmission. I am totally sure, because I struggled a lot, and I maybe will change those out, because I was not able to mount the larger motor in this crawler, not only because there is room missing, but because of 2 simple screw holes. Now I will have to check the upgrade motor I do have here. So that's the Rgt upgrade motor, which does not fit to the 1/24 Euro AV, because this one has the holes for the screws on the same side. Okay. And is this the same motor? No. It's... Yes, this seems to be exactly the same motor in the Atlas 6x6. Check this out. FF0500SH1855. So that's exactly the same motor. This is the Rgt Racing Motor 13625. I ordered this from Banggood, and that's the motor that comes in the FS crawler, and that does not fit to the transmission of the 1/24 Euro AV crawler, not only because there is missing space here, you could manage this maybe with the links, but because there are not 4 but only 2 mounting holes for the screws, so this and that. You cannot make holes on the other side because there is already a screw. Now I'm interested in this, and I will take the transmission of my 1/24 crawler and compare it, because I'm totally sure this plate is different. If this plate would be in the 1/24, you could use this motor, but it's not possible. Took the gearbox off my 1/24 D90. It's easy, only 3 screws. The same in the Atlas, and the covers are exactly the same here, already lubricated, the one of my 1/24 and here of the Atlas, but of course the metal drive shafts are upgrade. You can see it here that the screw holes are different. Here the Atlas gearbox does have 1, 2, 3, 4 openings for screws to mount the motor, and the 1/24 Euro AV or AMEV D90 does only have 1, 2 holes for screws, and here a further hole for mounting the cover, and therefore unfortunately it's impossible that way to mount one of those motors, because the screw holes are on the opposite side. I will think about this now. Maybe cutting this mounting hole and closing it and try to make new mounting holes for the larger motor in the 1/24 crawler too. I will show this to you in a different video after I've finished this Euro AV AMEV D90 crawler. I already have it for more than 1.5 years. So they improved. That's the old plastic part, and that's the new one of the Atlas, and more options. Whole truck more or less disassembled, Atlas in parts. So let's talk about the guts a little bit. First let's talk about ball bearings, because the Atlas 6x6 does only come with bushings, not one ball bearing. However, those bushings do have quite a nice quality. Don't know how well you can see this on camera, but that's one of the steering bushings of the Atlas, and that's the same bushing of the Euro AV AMEV 1/24 truck. And you can see that the Atlas bushings here, they are much shinier, so they seem to be polished. And I'm not totally sure if I want to upgrade all bushings or to change all bushings to ball bearings. It's not easily possible anyway. However, I counted and measured the bushings and will tell you what you would need. First, we would need 6 of those 4 mm inner diameter, 8 mm outer diameter, 3 mm width. You need 2 of those per axle. So those are those bushings or ball bearings if you want. But there is one problem: the front axle. That's the front axle. Of course, it does have the same, come on, bushings or bearings, but it's not possible to take those off, because those pins, those dog bones, are kind of glued or whatever into the end parts, and I guess taking those off could be quite difficult. So I won't try this, but I will change those bushings in the center of the axles to ball bearings in the middle and the rear axle, because I guess there is not a lot of danger of rusting. And then for the steering only, we need 2 of those, which are 5 mm inner diameter, 8 mm outer diameter, and 2.5 mm width. So those are for the steering knuckles. Those belong into the steering knuckles here, and I'll probably will not change those because they can get quite wet often. And then the bearings we need most of are those. Those are 3 mm inner diameter, 6 mm outer diameter, and 2.5 mm width. You need those for the pinion, so they sit here. In each axle you need 1, in the center axle you need 2. So you'll need 4 for the pinions of the 6x6, and you need 2 for each axle outside here, so for the front axle and also for the rear axles. Here sit those bushings. They will get wet if you drive in water, so I'm not sure if I will change those. And you need 2 more of those for the central transmission. And here you can see all the bearings you will need for the central transmission. I disassembled the central transmission. You need 2 of those 3x6 by 2.5 millimeter bearings if you want to change to ball bearings, and you need 6 tiny 2 millimeter inner diameter, 5 millimeter outer diameter, and 2.5 millimeter with ball bearings. And as you can see here, I did already search those, and I will for sure change those bushings to ball bearings in the central transmission. What else will I do with the axles? I will lubricate all gears with white grease, and I will also put a little bit of bearing oil to the ball bearings in the center transmission. Those are the upgrades I plan to do when reassembling the Atlas now for the axles. Reassembled the axles, was not a big deal, and lubricated the axles, all the gears, with white grease. Steel bushings inside of the axles, and put ball bearings into the main transmission instead of the bushings. What's quite funny, this screw here, that's not the original screw. The one I told you I had problems with the 1-24, that's a kind of fake screw, because it's impossible to get the screw inside because the thread is blocked by the other screw. So they did have the same problem as I had in the 1-24 D90, and they simply, come on, guess they simply did not put a screw inside here. To be honest, I do not remember anymore if the screw inside this position, or the screw that was in this position, was mounted firmly or not, but it does not seem so, because you see this looks only damaged, so they had the same problem I had, but they simply seem to have not mounted a screw there, or a kind of fake screw. It's not a big deal. However, I use a tiny 1.4 millimeter screw, and with this the cap of the main transmission is mounted firmly. So no perfect solution they found, but they made it, I don't know, the Chinese way. In the third drive shaft, the short one where I had my problems, I found that that's no pin. I don't know if you can see this on camera. That's a tiny Phillips head screw. Maybe you can see it now. And it's totally bent, and probably it's even not mentioned to get out of the other side. And I loosened this screw now, and now the shaft does turns smoothly again. However, this tiny screw is bent, and I will take it out and I will try to put 2 small screws inside. That's a funny solution they made here. And this is bent. I don't know, I don't think I bent it when I used the pliers, and was not totally inserted. However, it seems quite short, and I think it should be possible to use 2 shorter screws, so 1 screw on each side. Diameter of this screw is, let's say, 1 millimeter tiny screw, and 2 short. Two holes for the screw. Maybe you can see it that way. So I have to check 2 1 millimeter screws, 2 shorter ones, and put 1 on each side. Or 1x4, maybe 1x4 millimeter screws should work perfectly. Magnetize. Therefore a 000 screwdriver comes handy. Phillips head. Okay. Problem fixed, hopefully. Quite strange, this screw it's bent. Maybe it's bent from driving, I don't know. I guess those 2 are a better solution, and this single screw is not long enough to get out on the opposite side. By the way, the drive shafts, those knuckles, are made out of metal, and that's an improvement to the Euro AV are maybe 1/24, because this stuff is made out of plastic. My maybe came with red drive shafts, don't know why. And this was a problem because I always lost the drive shafts, always came apart during driving, so I immediately bought the metal drive shafts. We will see if metal drive shafts are also necessary for the Atlas, but it seems those are more sturdy than the plastic connectors in the Euro AV Amivi Hobby Plus scroller. The shocks, I will for sure change those horrible M2 by 1 centimeter or M2 by 10 Phillips head screws and use M2 by 10 cap screws instead. And I will put a drop of shock oil in each shock, which should make them less springy. However, they are quite okay. But maybe a drop of oil makes them even better. Let's check. That's 5,000, so that's quite a bummer oil. We will see how this does. We will see if a little bit of oil gives an improvement to those shocks to make an oil-filled mod, as in the Mini Cs they are smaller. That's probably not really possible. The servo is said to be waterproof, so let's take a look inside. If there are any seals. Not really, maybe it's coated. The board is coated, at least here there are no rubber seals and there are also no O-rings. So probably water will get inside, and here on the top plastic gear and no seal. We'll see how this works. Otherwise it should be easy to change it out against the different 9-gram servo. I will not change the servo till I do have any problems. Battery 7.4 volt, 600 milliamps, and I tested if it's really a 600 milliamp hours battery. Discharged the cells to 3.2 volt each before recharging it to check how many milliamps they will take. And now fully charged. And you can see 585 milliamp hours. So really nice, really a 600 milliamp hours 2S LiPo battery. And as you have seen, it is a 600 milliamp hours 2 cell LiPo battery, so no cheating here. Nice. The radio seems to be a Turbo RC radio, the Turbo RC 91803G VT. You know, those are those you can get in so many different colors. Those super cheap radios, I like them. I did already buy some. Kids like them, girls like them, and let's test if it works. Probably it will work because the Euro AV 1 to 24th radio and the Amiibi radio or receivers work with those radios, but let's test. Off, there's a bind plug. Funny as it is, this bind plug does only have 2 pins and not 3 pins. You get a bind plug, it's in the bag with the charger, but probably it's not necessary because binding is only shortcutting, so this should work that way too, I hope. Now it should be in binding mode. And did it work? Yes, it worked. So no bind plug necessary. And you see, it also works with this Turbo RC radio and with my white one, and I also have a black one. Not always a Fly Sky radio necessary, a Noble or a GT3C or a Dumbo RC, which is much larger than those. I like those tiny radios, especially for the kids. So Turbo RC receiver and works with all those radios. And I told you I want to test the voltage that comes out of those plugs for the LEDs. So let's check this. And come on, 5 volts, so 5.2 volts. So if you plug LEDs to this receiver, you will have to use resistors. 5.3 volts. Okay, nice. What else to say? With alcohol it was quite easy to get all this Loctite or thread lock of the metal frame. As already mentioned, for the shocks I will use hex head screws now and not the Phillips head screws that came with the Atlas. The front bumper does have room for 2 more LEDs. You can simply clip them in, and therefore it's nice. There is a further plug, so 5 volts, use the appropriate resistors, and you can simply light your Atlas up in front with 4 lights instead of 2 lights. I will now reassemble it, but before I will probably make tire foams and put weights in the tires to check if this increases the climbing ability. Maybe you remember from my first video it could climb an incline of about 54 degrees maximum. 55 was too much. We will see if weights and foams will improve this. The body is quite nice, even if those windows are so small. I don't know how scale this is, but I guess it's hard to make those larger. You would have to... I will probably let this, but white inside is not that nice, so I will probably paint it black inside and maybe make a very simple interior and the driver. And maybe it's even possible to paint the frame. We will see how this plastic is to primer and to paint. You can disassemble the cage, it's not the frame, the cage easily. All those tubes, and maybe kind of gunmetal would be nice, and also for the exhausts to remove this cheap plastic look. To paint them chrome will not be really successful, I guess, because painting in chrome is always quite a hassle and chrome doesn't stick very well. Maybe I will try to make those gunmetal too. I will see. First I will, because it's easy to do this later, you can disassemble all these plastic parts easily. Maybe I will reassemble it and check what tire foams and weights will do for the Atlas and its climbing ability. There's not much more to say. I do not see any need for metal links. Okay, someone wanted to see it compared to a Wpl truck, so I will pick up a Wpl truck. I can already say the tires and the axles will not fit. First a JJRC body, and you see this is much larger, so not the same scale but much larger. I will pick up the C34 rapidly, and here compared to a C34, so you see this is totally different scale, much larger. Tires of the WPLs are larger, and the MNs of course, so not really comparable. What is comparable is the Mini C 4x4, the Suzuki, but even that's a larger scale. I will reassemble my Atlas now and do the tire foam mods, and we'll see how it climbs afterwards, and maybe I will paint it, but I guess I will do this later. First make it run again, because what's really nice is you can disassemble all this stuff without having to disassemble the whole car. I hope I didn't forget anything, but I do not think so. So thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next video. I'll be back.